I recently took a trip on the Spirit of British Columbia, a ship that I had previously not really cared much about, mainly because if you see an example of a BC ferry, this is pretty much the poster child of the entire BC Ferries fleet, and so I wasn't really looking forward to it because I thought the ships were overrated and pretty average. However, after going on them, my opinions completely changed, and that's what this video is about. So, let's get into the tour. After heading down from Kelowna the day before, we boarded the ferry, which was a pretty cool experience. But I will say one unique thing about this ship is just that the bridge wings, well, kinda don't exist. Like, they do sort of exist, but they're enclosed and they're more like a cruise ship's bridge. I have been on the bridge of a few BC ferries, but none like this, so it was pretty interesting. After finding our way onto the vehicle deck, we got up and watched the departure, and after just a little bit of walking around and hanging out, I finally decided to start the tour. We start up on the front deck just below the bridge, which you just saw. This little area is really cool, and is a great place to watch the view, and surprisingly, despite it being very similar to a lot of places on the Oak Bay in Cowichan, which video coming soon on that, there was not a lot of wind here this day, which was really great. Anyways, passing into this little nook and cranny, we see the rigid hull inflatable boats, which are kinda like lifeboats, but more meant for man overboard and stuff like that. We see a crew entrance, and walking down here is also another crew area of the ship. Also, it should be noted, these benches are not only life rafts, but also benches. So if you do need a life jacket, go to the benches, because they're under there if you just lift them up. These pods as well are interesting because I talked about them in a previous Rules of Navigation episode, and it was cool seeing the systems that I had talked about in action. The promenades of the Spirit class are actually very nice, and I do see why people usually tend to spend their time outside with weather like this. On the day we were out, it was really beautiful and not Vancouver weather at all. Going up here, you can see sort of the third deck of the ship. This deck has no interiors that are open to passengers. There's also a sign on the back of the ship that says powered by natural gas, as the Spirit class recently got an LNG overhaul, making them much more clean and fuel efficient. Anyways, you see this front area over here, which is indeed very windy, and I would not recommend going over here for most days. But it is a very nice area, and you can actually see into the bridge. Though I will note that you can ask for a tour of the bridge if you really want. They will give it to you, just don't be too annoying about it. I did actually get a tour of the bridge on the Queen of Cowichan, but that's also for later. Looking back on the aft deck, you can also see the absolutely beautiful funnel, which I really do hope they add to future BC Ferry ships, because it is very nice. I also looked back from this deck and saw the amazing snow-capped mountains of BC. The natural beauty of this province really does amaze me, and that's why I really like going to Vancouver Island, as I do think the lower mainland and the coastal regions are the most beautiful part of BC, though the Rockies and Kootenays are a close second. Anyways, heading down the stairs onto the lower deck, we see the aft area with a windbreaker for a door, another passenger entrance, and even more life pods. Once again, really cool seeing all of these, and also I do realize they're called life rafts now that I think of it, not life pods. Anyways, a lot of more lifebelt bench sort of thing, and more windbreakers, except 2 sets in order to prevent any wind from getting back here. Further aft as well, you also see this amazing seating area, which I really like, and through those windows, by the way, is a lounge that you can pay $14 for some extra peace and quiet, which I don't really think is worth it, because there's a lot of areas to do that on the ship. Anyways, back here is also an amazing flag, and an amazing view of the ship's wake. Looking back toward the funnel here is also cool, and I really like these circular windows. And heading back from this area is much more the same, but this aft area is indeed a very nice spot, and I do see why a lot of people choose this as well. However, the sunniness of this part of the route did not last for long, and yes, that is foreshadowing. Going back on this set of windows here, we have the entrance to the Seascape Lounge. This is that area I mentioned previously, where you can pay $14 for some peace and quiet, which, for me, obviously, is just not worth it, and I don't even know if you can exit the area, but I guess you can. But anyways, over here is a little seating area, and, of course, workstations, which have now become a major stay on BC Ferries, but this ship was actually the first to implement them all the way back in the 90s, but they look very different back then. Passing the coffee shop, which we will get back to, you see a ton of seats here, one of which had a dog out the window, and this whole area is pretty much just a seating area, beige and blue seats, that's all really, but over here is also one of the 2 kids zones, and yes, there are 2 of them. They're pretty good and fitted out for kids, but back when I first saw these ships, they were a bit different. Anyways, heading back towards this elevator, you can actually see this hallway, which looks like it would be for crew only, and for the most part it is. This side has the female bathroom, but over here as well is a tiny little area that's protected, has a TV, and is one of those spots where you can get some peace and quiet for basically free. So it's another reason I do not recommend paying for the Seascape Lounge. Anyways, going over here to what is basically the main stair area, the conclusion comes to this level, and we then go down to the lower decks. After saying bye to that dog over there, we go down and see this main area, which is one of the first areas you'll see if you enter the ship through this staircase. Going over here, you have some vending machines with adequate snacks, and very big windows to look outside. These little stool and table sort of seating, and another style of seat at the bottom down here. As well as that is also the Passages gift shop, which on the way back actually had the new Hunger Games book, funny enough, but the Spirit class actually has the largest Passages gift shop of BC Ferries. Here is the main forward lounge area, with a desk for public transit information once you get off the ship, and this is the most popular lounge area because out those doors there is directly where you get on if you're a foot passenger, so logically this is the main area where everyone kinda just sits down and doesn't want to walk any further. Anyways, you can see then in the big lounge area with those very 90s lights on the roof that were flickering, and also an area to get out for lifeboats. Heading past that passenger lounge, we have the other access to seascapes, and most of this side is pretty much the same. Past that area, however, is a giant eating area, which is also kind of like the main dining spot of the ship. This is a pretty nice spot, and although I didn't actually eat here, but I'll talk about that later, it is indeed a very, very big dining area, and probably the biggest I've actually seen on a BC ferry so far. Passing this, we have a lot of tourism information for people on the ferries that are going to see stuff. But past this area, however, is a little bit of a disappointment. You see, back here used to be the Pacific Cafe. However, it's now being renovated. But renovations started in 2020, and they've been going on for 5 years. It really doesn't seem that difficult to complete it. But anyways, they're renovating the eating area at the back of the ship, and it's a little bit frustrating how long it's taking. But it's apparently going to open this year. I highly doubt that. It's especially frustrating when you can see that after 5 years, no work has actually been done on the space and they could very well just reopen it. But this was part of a move in 2020 for BC Ferries to fully close down the Pacific Buffet on all of their ships, ending their buffets after 44 years. Although, technically, the Pacific Buffet does indeed still exist on quite a few ships that haven't been renovated, and it also exists at the bottom of the ocean on the Queen of the North. Still, although it is one of the most biggest disappointments of the trip, I will indeed be coming back eventually, and try to get this ship again on another route in a little while, just to see what the new space has been changed into. Past that little area and behind is the next little corridor, which is opposite to it but does still have a bit. It's a nice little corridor with great views, and it has the builder's plaque, the commissioning plaque, and this little fact board about the Spirit of British Columbia, which I'm a little bit disappointed I didn't get a better photo of. Anyways, going past, you have even more stuff such as bus information, ship certificates, safety information like where the lifeboats are, public transit information, and behind that some stairs. And as well as that, there's also a lot of ads plastered along the ship, which I did not notice, but when I'm going through this ship, I actually notice it now. And now that I'm thinking about it, I kinda recognize it on the Queen of Cowichan. Anyways, this is again another side of the Coastal Cafe. And then, going behind that, is kind of a lap along the ship. And that is the tour of the interior at the Spirit of British Columbia. Overall, a pretty nice ship, I do gotta say. I do also gotta mention that I'm not gonna be giving a tour of the car deck because it is indeed very boring, but I did get some footage of it if you really want to see that. Also, another interesting thing is that these doors here that go from the car deck to the main passenger deck are pretty much bulkhead doors. Like, they hiss when they close, and they have a button you press to get them open. Very strange, but interesting. I should also mention the coffee bar that's just behind the seating area that I mentioned before. It has some coffee, and I will be getting more into depth about it, but the hot chocolate that I got there, well, I mean, it existed, it was edible. But anyways, for most of the rest of the journey, I kinda just sat and watched from the inside. However, I did eventually go onto the front to watch us going through the islands and finish my hot chocolate there, because a very cold outside mixed with a very hot drink sounded pretty nice. I also managed to get some really great footage off the front of the ship of us going throughout the islands. It was indeed very beautiful, and I do recommend going and doing that if you are ever on this ship. And, well, most ships in general do have an area at the front like this. And I think the cloudiness of the later parts of our voyage was actually a benefit, because it did indeed look very cool, and I will indeed be remembering that for a long time, because it was a very memorable and amazing moment. But it was a bit spoiled by the end by the fact that it started raining, and everyone began to run inside, immediately telling me that no one there was from Vancouver if they were running away from the rain. However, eventually I had to return to the car, and our voyage concluded on the Spirit of British Columbia, and we drove to Victoria to continue the next part of our journey, which will be in a future video. And with that, let's get into the history of this ship. The Spirit of British Columbia was built as part of the S-Class, more commonly known as the Spirit Class. She was built in 1992 and is 167 meters long and 32 meters wide. And she sails about 19.5 knots. The Spirit of British Columbia was one of the last ships to be built with this old retro BC Ferries livery, and it wouldn't really last long, because BC Ferries eventually changed their logo, culminating in the ship having this very strange hybrid, where the ship has the funnel that it does today, but not the actual stripes that it does today, and the lower hull is left relatively unchanged until 2004. This was because BC Ferries changed their logo in 2003, but didn't actually change the liveries until 2004 and as late as 2005 on some ships. Also, another interesting thing is that only the Spirit of British Columbia and Spirit of Vancouver Island were built. This was because they were made only for the Tsawwassen to Schwartz Bay route, and they didn't really need any more. The reason the Coastal class had more ships was just because that they were designed to operate on multiple routes. Anyways, the Spirit of British Columbia drew a lot of fanfare when she was originally built, and they quickly became fan favorites among BC Ferries, and proved very useful for BC Ferries. In 2017, the Spirit of British Columbia went under a midlife refit, which made it be powered by LNG, which burns cleaner than regular fuels, and is also a bit cheaper, making it better for the economy and the environment. And that's basically the history of this ship, considering that, thankfully, it hasn't had any big disasters. So, let's rate the ship, based on food, ship, and experience. Now, I do realize these ratings are a little bit strange for a ferry like this, and I probably should have changed the ranking system a long time ago, but shut up, it's my video. Anyways, first off, the food. I did not really have a lot of food on this ferry, and all I really had was the hot chocolate, which was neither hot nor chocolatey, but I mean, it was edible and it's not like I didn't hate it. But yeah, that's all I can really say about it. It was super average and not really anything unique, so I'm just gonna give it a 5 out of 10. The ship itself was a lot better than I expected. A lot of open spaces along the deck. It's powered by LNG, so you feel a bit less guilty for polluting the planet using it. Has that front area, which you're currently seeing the footage off of, that was very, very nice to stand out. And, all in all, it was just a really good ship with a lot of stuff to do, so I would give it a 9 out of 10. Though of course I hesitate to give it a 10 out of 10 because of that closed buffet at the back, which I still can't believe that they haven't implemented yet. It just seems so... yeah, you know what, whatever. Next is the experience. Overall, pretty good, all things considered. It was good in the sense that it was a nice ship, and it was a beautiful day out for the first part, but other than that, there just wasn't really a lot. I mean, it was very crowded, and it rained near the end, and there were a few other things that kind of just dampened the experience for me. Pun not intended. Anyways, I think I'll just give it a 7 out of 10, probably. Actually, that gives us the lowest ranking for any BC ferry so far that I've toured, which I guess is only 4, but we'll get to the 4th one later. Anyways, this ship gets a 21 out of 30, which I kind of think is a bit unfair for me, but those are my genuine thoughts, and I guess that is what they add up to, so yeah. For reference, the Queen of Oak Bay is a 24 out of 30, and the New Westminster is a 29 out of 30. I bet that there will be a lower ranking of the ship eventually, because I do have some things to say about the Cowichan. Anyways, that's all for this video. Thanks a lot for enjoying it, and there should be another video out soon, but currently my progress is a little bit slow. I don't really know how to do the 2-part or 3-part that's a good question thing, so I'm just gonna end the video here, bye.